Have you ever heard a story that just doesn't seem to make sense? A story about a man who saved billions of people, but who also became a mass murderer? Well, this isn't fiction. This is the real, contradictory story of a scientist named Fritz Haber.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, his work is directly responsible for feeding billions. Some estimates say half the people alive today owe their existence to his discovery. But on the other side, he's known as the father of chemical warfare. This is the story of a man who literally gave the world bread and bombs from the air.
So where do we even begin with a story this complicated? Well, it really kicks off with what might be the most important and for sure the most controversial Nobel Prize ever awarded.
So picture this. It's 1918, and Fritz Haber wins the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for something that would fundamentally change our planet. But instead of a standing ovation, there was outrage. A lot of his fellow scientists just flat out refused to go to the ceremony. Two other Nobel winners actually turned down their own awards to protest his. The New York Times even wrote this incredibly harsh article about him. So what on earth did this guy do to get that kind of reaction for an award meant to celebrate a triumph for humanity? To really get it, we have to rewind and understand the global crisis he solved. And weirdly enough, this world-changing story starts with bird poop. Yep, you heard that right.
Back in 1856, the United States passed something called the Guano Islands Act. Get this, it literally gave the president the power to use the U.S. military to seize and defend any new island an American found, as long as it was covered in bird droppings, also known as guano. That's how ridiculously valuable this stuff was.
By the mid-1800s, guano was basically worth its weight in gold. Well, almost. At $76 a pound, you could trade just 4 pounds of bird poop for 1 pound of solid gold. Just let that sink in for a second. So why all the fuss? Well, the secret ingredient in guano was nitrogen. Nitrogen is absolutely essential for life. It's the fourth most common element in you and me. It's the building block of proteins. It's a critical part of our DNA, and it's what allows plants to grow. Without nitrogen, life on Earth as we know it just stops. And that was the huge problem. Humanity's farms were getting so good, so intense, that we were sucking all the nitrogen out of the soil way faster than nature could put it back in. Crops were failing, and a massive global food crisis was right around the corner.
Things got so bad that in 1898, a famous chemist named Sir William Crookes basically sounded the alarm. He warned that mass starvation was just a few decades away unless a chemist, someone, could figure out how to make a new source of nitrogen.
And that brings us to the breakthrough. The moment our man, Fritz Haber, stepped onto the scene and figured out how to solve this massive crisis by literally pulling the answer right out of thin air. Now, this was no easy task. The air we breathe is about 78% nitrogen, right? But the catch is that atmospheric nitrogen atoms are locked together by an incredibly strong triple bond. It's one of the toughest nuts to crack in all of chemistry. Breaking it takes a colossal amount of energy. But after 5 years of relentless work, Haber cracked the code. He figured out a process. You take nitrogen and hydrogen gas, you subject them to insane pressures and super high temperatures, and you add a special catalyst. And bam! The nitrogen bonds break, and you get ammonia, the key ingredient for fertilizer. This process, later scaled up as the Haber-Bosch process, was a total game changer. For the first time ever, we could mass-produce synthetic fertilizer. The impact was so profound, people had this amazing phrase for it. They said Haber had figured out how to make bread from the air.
It is almost impossible to overstate how huge this was. Today, right now, it's estimated that about half of all the nitrogen atoms inside your body, the very stuff that makes you, came from the Haber process. Without it, the world's population couldn't be what it is today. It's that simple.
But remember, this is a story of contradictions, and this life-saving discovery had an incredibly dark side, a side that was about to be unleashed by the start of World War I.
When the war began, Haber, a fierce German patriot, didn't hesitate. He immediately volunteered his scientific genius for the war effort. And that same chemistry that could feed billions would now be used to kill. From bread from the air to bombs from the air. You see, the same chemical principles apply. That huge amount of energy needed to break nitrogen's triple bond, well, that energy gets released when new nitrogen compounds are formed. And ammonium nitrate, the very same compound used in fertilizer, is also a powerful explosive. Haber's factories quickly switched from making fertilizer to making munitions for the German army.
But Haber didn't stop with explosives. He went further, pioneering the development of chemical weapons. He actually argued it was more humane, telling a worried friend that it would end the war faster and ultimately save more lives.
On April 22, 1915, Fritz Haber was there, personally overseeing the first major chemical weapons attack in modern history. 168 tons of chlorine gas, which is heavier than air, was released. It rolled across the battlefield and sank down into the Allied trenches. The gas reacted with the water in soldiers' lungs, creating acid and causing them to drown from the inside out. Over 5,000 men died in that single attack. For his work, Haber was promoted to captain.
In the end, Haber's life just became this cascade of bitter, tragic ironies. His legacy forces us to ask some really tough questions about the role of science and the responsibilities of scientists.
After the war, he got that controversial Nobel Prize. Then, the very first plant to use his process catastrophically exploded, killing hundreds. Then, in 1933, despite being a war hero for Germany, Haber, who was Jewish, was targeted by the rising Nazi Party. He resigned from his position to protest Nazi laws that were firing other Jewish scientists. A year later, he died of a heart attack, an exile from the country he loved so much.
And here's the final, horrifying gut punch of his story. A cyanide-based pesticide called Zyklon B, which had been developed at his own scientific institute, was later modified by the Nazis. It became the gas they used in the gas chambers to murder millions of people in the Holocaust, including some of Haber's own relatives. So Haber's story just leaves you with this enormous, unsettling question. His discovery saved billions. It also enabled destruction on an unimaginable scale. It's the ultimate reminder that every scientific breakthrough is a double-edged sword. And it leaves us wondering, as we get more and more powerful, how do we learn to control our own creations without destroying ourselves?